Okay, so now I'm happy with the initial flight test. I did play around a little bit more, and ground effect is already on, so that's good. And I consulted some experts, and it's clear that my spin arm and spin min were too high, so I've sort of set those as low as I can go. A, to get motors turning, which turned out to be around 2%, and then B, to start generating thrust, which was fractionally above that, so I set it to 3%. So I've changed those parameters. So now I'm going to do a more exact calibration of the IMUs and the compass now that I'm sort of happy with the general setup. So I've taken the props off the copter and I'm going to connect to it. And I'm going to do an Accel calibration again, but this time obviously the board is inside the copter, the flight controller, and I'm going to do this. It's important for the thing not to be moving while you're doing the calibration, so I've got sort of a big box file to sort of prop it against, and hopefully I can get a reasonable calibration like that. So let's start that. So okay, place vehicle level, click when done. Okay, so it's already level, click when done. Place it on its left. So that is this side. It actually just sits on the motors quite nicely. There we go. Place it on its right. So I'll flip it over. Same idea. That's about right. Placing those down. I'm still going to balance this on the motors, so I'm going to prop them on these plastic boxes here. Those up. Essential deal. Then on its back. Just do across these two. Like that. Okay, calibration successful. I'm going to reboot it now. And then I'm going to set it, I'm going to calibrate level again just to double check. I'm actually going to do this on my bench, which I know is dead level. So I'll just pop it up there. Calibrate level. Done. Okay. So now what I'm going to do, I think we'll just reboot that. Okay, so temperature variations for these IMUs can be quite significant, especially on boards that generate a lot of heat. And some of the H743s can get quite hot, and obviously it's in a confined space. And we're entering winter in the UK now, so it's going to get quite cold, go from indoors to outdoors, and quite a lot of variation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a temperature calibration of the IMUs. Okay, so TCal. So I'm going to set temperature calibration to 2. TCal options, I'm not going to save it in the bootloader. I'm also going to set this to 2 for the barometer. Oops. Not connected, need to be reconnected. So TCal. So I'm going to set TCal 1, TCal 2, because there's 2 IMUs. Set TCal for the baro. Right parameters. Okay. Disconnect and reconnect to get the parameters. And then find TCal. Okay, so here we go, TCal. And so what I want is to set TCal min and max. So and this needs to be roughly, depends what temperature the flight controller gets to, so I wonder if we can see that here. No, can't find it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll set those 2 parameters to some values. It needs to be a low value, so I'm probably going to go to 5 degrees for minimum. So 5 degrees here, and then 5 degrees here. And then I need to set the maximum temperature, so it's probably only 25 degrees in here. I'm not quite sure how hot this will get, but I'll figure that out. So I'm going to set that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in the freezer to take it way down to 0 degrees. And my wife's away, so I can do that. And then I'm going to bring it out, power it on, and the IMU calibration will run. The temperature calibration will run as it warms up, and it will generate some parameters here which allow the IMU settings, the IMU values to be modified based on temperature. Okay, the copter's been in the freezer for about 15 minutes now, so I'm going to connect up the battery. It's nice and cold. and you can see that the light pattern is flashing because it's calibrating. It's not quite beeping because unfortunately, as we know, the beeper doesn't work. But you can see that the LEDs are flashing in a calibration pattern as it calibrates. So we're going to leave. I'm going to leave that going as it warms up. And if it needs a bit of help, I can always use a hairdryer or something. But I shall wait for that to finish calibrating and then see what we've got. Okay, and I came back after 10 minutes and the C's are beeping, but also it looks like the calibration has finished. So I'm going to connect the USB cable and see what we've got. Disconnect the battery. Connect up the USB. Just okay. And hopefully in TCal we have some values. There we go. Okay, so yeah, we've got some values there. Actually, it went down to minus 0.1 degrees and up to 30. I don't know whether 30 is enough, but it'll do for now for temperature calibration. And the barrier doesn't seem to have learned, but the TCal has set itself there. You can see TCal2 enabled. So yeah, it's interesting. I don't know why that hasn't. Usually the barrow would learn at the same time, so I'm surprised that that hasn't happened. Anyway, okay, I'm going to set that back to 0 for the barrow. These, and I'll leave these values at what they're set to. Okay. Okay, so that's done a much more accurate IMU calibration. And what I'm going to do now is do a compass motor calibration. So I've already got the props off, and you've probably seen this before. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some smaller props on. These are a bit too big and a bit too dangerous. I'm going to put some smaller props on, upside down, rotated one position round, so that they generate down thrust rather than up thrust, and it means that I can throttle up to do the compass calibration. So I'll put the props on now. Okay, so I've put my smaller props on, upside down, rotated one position round, and before I do the compass calibration, I'm just going to do the motor calibration. I'm going to do another compass calibration, but this time I'm going to do it with the battery attached, just in case there's any compass interference that comes from the battery at idle. So I'm going to connect up the battery, already connected here, and we've got compass there, so I'm going to connect up the battery. Alright, and I'm going to start the compass calibration here on this page. There we go. Started, and I'll waggle it around as usual. Alright, and there you can see mag success, and so I'm going to reboot with these changes. The fit's slightly worse than it was before, so I think there is some interference coming from the battery. But I'm going to reboot. Okay. And I'll just check in the EKF as well. If I, oops, I think we lost connection there, which is no good. That's actually reading really, really, really low now on the EKF calibration screen, which is great. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is do a motor calibration of the compass. So I'm just going to put my, it's much easier on a bigger copter, and so I'm going to go to setup, and there's optional hardware here, and compass motor calibration. Okay, and so what this asks me to do is start, and then I'll throttle up. It'll get pretty noisy because I want to generate a reasonable amount of thrust. I don't want to kill the thing, but this is why having props on is necessary, because if you don't have props on you can burn out the motors. So I'm going to start throttle up, and what I tend to find is that you need to throttle up quite rapidly. If you try and do it very gradually, you get a very poor calibration sequence. So let's see how this goes.
Motors on.
All right, so actually quite a good amount of interference there, you can see. So getting up to 50 amps, which is pretty cool. And interference, I mean, these spikes we can ignore, but the interference getting up to sort of 70% at the high end. So yeah, that's quite a lot of interference, more interference than I was expecting. And it's all coming, it'll all be coming out of the battery wires there. Probably partly because there's a gap between them, and electrical theory says that if you've got a gap you get a magnetic field. So hopefully this is not going to, hopefully that's not so much that I'm going to have to reorient the battery. We'll see. I'll see how it goes for now, but I think that was well worth doing. So I've got we have a internal error here, which is not good. I don't know quite why that is, but anyway. So I'm going to reboot again. Oh. I'm just going to fire up the EKF gauge just to see that, no, really not getting any compass interference there at all. Obviously the motors aren't spinning, but yeah, so that's pretty good. So I'm going to, that's the sort of more advanced calibration done. So I've calibrated the compass, I've temperature calibrated the IMUs. There's still a question mark over why the barometer temperature calibration didn't work, but I can investigate that later. But yeah, I think that's the, obviously I did a quite an accurate Accel calibration, so I think we are all ready to go for first test flight, and unfortunately that needs good weather, which we don't have here at the moment. So going to have to stop it there for now.